Hey guys, welcome to Pagan Happy Hour. I am so excited to have you with me today. We are going to be celebrating the autumn equinox, which is just around the corner. So I have a really fun show in store for you today. We'll be talking about what the autumn equinox is, why we celebrate it today, why it was celebrated historically, where the term Mabon comes from, and I'm also going to be going over some lesser known autumn equinox traditions that do have some historical precedent that you might not be aware of. So we have a lot to cover today. And before we jump into it, if you are new here, welcome. I do Pagan Happy Hour every Friday at 5 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Eastern. And this is just a really great way for us all to connect and share thoughts and ideas about paganism and witchcraft. And there are two different ways you can support the show if you would like. The first way is through my Patreon, which I have linked down below. And if you do become a patron, you gain access to my exclusive Discord community where you can chat and share resources with fellow pagans. And the other great way you can support the show is through Super Chats, which is that $ button at the bottom of the chat. And you can donate any amount live here, and I will see your comments or questions show up really big on my screen. So I'll be able to bring your thoughts and ideas into the conversation. And throughout the hour, I'm going to be looking over here at your comments. So I'm going to bring in as many of your ideas and thoughts as possible. So let me turn on that drink music, and I do have something a little bit exciting to share with you. Let me get that music on. I actually have a sponsor for today's Pagan Happy Hour. So I was sponsored by Ale Horns, which I have linked down below. They made me a custom drinking horn with Pagan Happy Hour on it. How cute is that? And I got to pick out what symbol I wanted. I picked Molnor, but they have a ton of really cute pagan symbols. So if you are in the mood for a drinking horn, I highly recommend their site. Again, it's linked down below if you're interested. And I think they also sell mead and a few other various Viking, Norse pagan inspired items. So thank you so much to Alehorn for sponsoring today's episode of Pagan Happy Hour and for giving me this awesome drinking horn. So of course, I am drinking out of this today. I'm just having a beer, but let me know in the comments where you're from and what you are drinking today. So cheers, or I guess I should say skål. So let's see. Checking the comments. Okay, I see people chiming in from Pennsylvania. I see some of you are drinking mead tonight. That's a good choice. I see people chiming in from California, Winnipeg, Finland, Seattle, Minnesota, Chicago, Poland, Canada, Scotland, South Korea, Texas, Mexico, South Carolina, Ohio, Indiana, Germany, Canada, and the UK. Awesome. Thank you all so much for joining me. This is going to be so fun. So let me turn off the drink music, and then we are going to get into it. So there is a lot to cover for the autumn equinox. And if you are unfamiliar, the autumn equinox is one of the traditional holidays that many, but not all, pagans choose to celebrate. And it is part of something called the Wheel of the Year that you might be familiar with. The concept of the Wheel of the Year is most common to Wicca specifically, but pretty much all pagan traditions really recognized the changing of the seasons, the cycle of the year. So that concept is something that permeates so much of both ancient and modern pagan practices. And here with the equinox, what we are celebrating is the time when day and night is equal. So there are two equinoxes. You have the spring equinox, which many pagans call Ostara, and then you have the autumn equinox that some pagans call Mabon, but not all. So you have these two times on either side of the wheel of the year, and they represent the time when we have equal daylight and equal night. So both equinoxes are really a time to think about balance, right? As those daylight and nighttime hours are equal, this is an important time to reflect upon balance in our own life. I always like to jot down my simple kind of daily tasks, anything I'm feeling anxious about, if I have too much on my plate. And I use the autumn equinox as a time to maybe delegate tasks, remove tasks, spend more time perhaps on self-care, anything that I need to do to return to a state of balance. So that's one of the key themes to both equinoxes. Though we also have the solstices on the wheel of the year. So you have the two equinoxes, and then you have the two solstices, the summer solstice and the winter solstice, or some pagans might call the summer solstice Litha, and some pagans might call the winter solstice Yule. So you have these four holidays that kind of make up the wheel of the year that the ancient Britons might have celebrated. Now, this gets very tricky and very difficult to fully figure out, because how do we know the ancient Britons celebrated something like the autumn equinox, or even the solstices for that matter? As we know, the Druids, who came much later from the creators of the stone circles, but the Druids didn't write anything down, which is so frustrating. So the only thing we really have to look at is these ancient pagan stone circles, and notice how their alignment is connected to the solstices and the equinoxes. So that's really what leads us to believe that these four moments in the wheel of the year were greatly important to the ancient people of Northern Europe. And there are many different stone circles from all over. Of course, you're probably familiar with Stonehenge, but many of them are oriented towards different solstices or different equinoxes. So you have those four holidays, which the autumn equinox is one of them. And they also have four other additional holidays on the traditional wheel of the year, creating a total of 8 holidays. So where do these other 4 ones come from? These are actually from the Gaelic traditional calendar. So these 4 festivals would be ones that the ancient pagan Irish would have celebrated. Now, I'm sure you're familiar with Samhain, which is just around the corner. We'll, of course, be celebrating that for Pagan Happy Hour down the road. But Samhain is one of these Gaelic pagan festivals. So you have Samhain, but then you also have Imbolc, Lunasa, and Beltane. Those 4 festivals you combine with the solstices and the equinoxes, and that creates the pagan wheel of the year, all 8 festivals, the solstices and the equinoxes, and then the points in between those Irish traditional festivals. So not all pagans are going to be celebrating all 8 of these festivals. I know I will, because I love ancient pagan holidays, but it might depend on what pagan tradition you choose to follow, because those 8 holidays are mostly centered around Northern European pagan traditions. So if you are following a Greco-Roman pagan path, you might be celebrating different holidays around this time. Or if you are following like Cometicism or ancient Egyptian paganism, then you might be celebrating different holidays. So there are so many different forms of paganism, all with their own holidays, though I think there is a cohesive theme among them where many of them are associated with the wheel of the year as a whole, the turning of the seasons. And here at this time, most of festivals that occurred in the ancient pagan communities were about the harvest or the end of the harvest. We're coming towards the end. So clearly it was a really important time for our pagan ancestors. This would have been make or break, right? You're bringing in the last of those grain harvests, and time is really running out. Perhaps you're planting some winter crops like kale or things like that, but you have to survive the winter, right? So this time of year would be really important and a big time to celebrate, assuming you planned your agricultural community effectively. So there were a lot of festivities that did occur on the autumn equinox, but again, keep in mind, a lot of these traditions we'll be talking about are coming from folklore and coming from oral tradition that's been passed down that may or may not have historical basis, because so much of what we think about the autumn equinox is really not based on any written material whatsoever. So do keep that in mind. The autumn equinox is a tricky one. We have way more information on other holidays, but not so much about the autumn equinox, which is a shame. So I would love to obviously be able to know more about how the ancient people celebrated this particular holiday. But let me check your comments here, and then we'll get into a few of those ways. Let me see here. I'm just going to have a sip. Oh, I see. Let's see. Rick in the comments is mentioning Dia de los Muertos in Mexico. Yep, that's definitely a holiday coming up and a autumnal one, but probably more closer related to Samhain. Let's see. We have a super chat from Vocatus. Thank you so much. Very generous. That says, happy Friday. Oh, it looks like my video might be lagging a little bit. I'm checking your comments. It seems to be going in and out. I'm sorry about that. If it is going in and out, definitely keep me updated. I'd hate for this to get cut out. But let me see here, just checking your comments. And thank you so much again for the super chat. I really appreciate the donation. So we talked a bit about the solstices, the equinoxes, and another thing to keep in mind is that the specific date of the equinox changes each year. It's usually on the 20th through the 22nd. This year it is on Wednesday, the 22nd, I believe. So that's the specific day if you want to celebrate specifically on the exact autumn equinox. But there are many different holidays that are associated with this time of year that we do know a bit more about. So again, we're never going to know that much about how the Druids, for example, celebrated the autumn equinox because we don't have any written material. We do know a bit more from the Greco-Roman world. So in ancient Rome, there was a very popular festival that occurred around this time of the autumn equinox, and it is called Vendemmia, which is Vendemmia, if you would like to look that up. And that was a wine harvest festival where they celebrated the god of wine, Bacchus. So if you are looking for a deity to be working with at this time of year, Bacchus or Dionysus would be a good one, because this time specifically, at least in the Greco-Roman world, would have been associated with the wine harvest. So a lot of those harvest and wine deities would be connected to the autumn equinox. And then in ancient Greece, we have something interesting called the Eleusinian Mysteries. This was a multi-day, very elaborate ancient ritual that I've covered a couple times on my channel. I have some information on it in my Pagan Happy Hour episode about Hellenism. And the Alusinian Mysteries, they were mostly associated with Demeter and Persephone, so kind of that harvest image with Demeter. And with Persephone, you have this kind of dual aspect where she's going from the realm of the living into the dead, just as how after the equinox, we are really going into the dark time of the year. And this festival was really fascinating. It was apparently something that really changed your consciousness and your whole worldview. Great Greek thinkers like, I believe, Sophocles and Cicero participated in the Eleusinian Mysteries. So they were a huge part of Greek culture. And I've been fascinated about learning the details of what really went on in this ancient ritual, because I love the idea of someone trying to recreate or replicate the Eleusinian Mysteries. So those were two holidays we know a bit more about that occurred around the autumn equinox. Oh, and we have a super chat here from Peach. Thank you very much, asking about my necklace. It's a leaf. So yes, I am wearing it for the autumn equinox. I actually got this at a Ren fair. I love Renaissance fairs. I'm kind of nerdy like that. They were selling these and I thought it was lovely. So yeah, thank you for the super chat. I appreciate it. So another thing I want to mention too, and Peach was mentioning the term Mabon. Where does that come from, right? And if you have been reading, Wiccan traditions, you probably come across the term Mabon for the autumn equinox. Now, this is a fairly new term that was coined by Aiden Kelly in the 1970s. So this term is pretty much only associated with people who are Wiccan or practicing different forms of Wicca. Now, Aiden Kelly, he came up with this name from this piece of Welsh mythology. It's a character called Mabon ap Modron, which means Mabon, son of Modron. And this is part of the King Arthur lore, where Mabon was part of King Arthur's war band. So it's kind of connected to Welsh mythology, but also connected to King Arthur mythos. It's kind of confusing, honestly, when I've been looking this up, but that's basically where that term comes from. So it's a little piece of folklore, perhaps, that he pulled that name from, but it's not necessarily connected to something specifically autumnal. But that's where the term Mabon derives. And so for me personally, I used to call this holiday Mabon, but as I've shifted slightly away from Wicca and more towards Celtic and Norse traditions, I've just kind of started calling it the autumn equinox. But of course, you can call it whatever term you're interested in. And if you're curious on who Aiden Kelly is, he was a very important person. He had, I believe, his own branch of the Golden Dawn in the 1960s. And then he was an important member of various Gardnerian and Fairy Wiccan traditions. Gardnerian and Fairy are two prominent branches of the Wiccan faith. And then he also created the Covenant of the Goddess, which was a pagan organization dedicated towards, I believe, like civil rights for pagans in the United States, which is something that was more kind of everywhere, or more important, I guess, in the 70s and the 80s. I know back when pagans were really trying to connect through these large conventions, they were trying to get rights for pagans, trying to get kind of a seat at the table of the other big religions, trying to get recognized by mainstream religious organizations. And I think they did a lot. But recently, I feel like there's been less interest in trying to do that again, or trying to get a seat at the table of these larger religious organizations. And I see here in the comments, Peach is asking, I'd love to hear about the Lima and Golden Dawn stuff. Yeah, that would be a great topic for a future pagan happy hour. So let me know if you're interested in that. So let me see here. Next, I wanted to talk about two different pagan traditions that you might not know are pagan and that you might be unfamiliar with. Last time for Pagan Happy Hour, last week, we went over kind of simple ways to incorporate autumn into your pagan practice. We talked about decorating for the season. We talked about eating seasonally, going on walks, connecting with deities, leaving offerings, some of these types of activities. So definitely check that out if you're interested. But today I kind of wanted to go over two specific pagan traditions that I find interesting. And the first one I want to talk about is scarecrows. So let me jump into that after I have a sip. And oh no, I think I'm still having some connecting issues. I can see you guys mentioning in the comments. I'm so sorry about that. Checking my internet here. It seems like it should be okay, but maybe I'll have to upgrade for next week. Sorry about that if I am lagging. So let's see. Let's talk a bit about scarecrows because this is something I did not know, but scarecrows are super ancient. Now, when I mean ancient, I'm talking like ancient Egypt, ancient. There is evidence of ancient Egyptians having the first scarecrows, which was a simple net over a wooden frame. And quail would hide in the grain fields of the ancient Egyptians. And then they would go to the edges of their fields. The Egyptians would run and scare the quails into the net, thus saving their grain and also getting a nice dinner of quail. So, of course, it was a more practical method of saving the fields in ancient Egypt, but like everything in paganism, there's so much connected to agriculture, right? So that's the kind of first instance of scarecrows. We do know in ancient Greece, they also had their form of a scarecrow. Now, this one is very weird. So what they would do is they would carve wooden scarecrows in the shape of Priapus. He was the son of Dionysus and Aphrodite, which you think would be a good match. But if you look at Priapus online, he's definitely something. I would say he's unnaturally well endowed. So people found this image of Priapus so hideous, I guess back in the day they did, and then they would carve wooden statues of him, place them out in the field, figuring, oh my goodness, the crows are going to be totally frightened by this obscene image. So he became a new form of scarecrows. So it's just kind of funny. You'll get the joke if you look him up online. So that's the ancient Greek version. Now let's move into Germany for something a bit more witchy. So the tradition continued into Germany, where they would also carve scarecrows out of wood, but this time they would carve them in the shape of witches, with the same idea, the idea of scaring away the crows, scaring away the birds. Now, German immigrants to America took this tradition of carving scarecrows and they brought it here to the States. But here it was a little bit different, where people would create these scarecrows with kind of wooden poles and dress them up. And they had a different term for their scarecrows. they would call them the Botseman or the boogeyman. So that's where we get the term boogeyman from. It comes from the German immigrants to America creating their scarecrows. So this tradition of scarecrow creation is something that would have occurred around this time of year to protect the last of the harvest. And I find it fascinating that this is something that's been done by countless different cultures, each of them putting their own kind of spin on it. And if you're looking for something a bit more unique to do this autumn equinox that is a bit different than just decorating your home, then I recommend creating a scarecrow. You could create one in the shape of a witch, in the shape of the ancient Greek Priapus, or really anything. It could be a good, fun thing to do. So let me check your comments here. Let me know your thoughts on this, and then we'll dive into the next obscure pagan autumnal tradition. Let's see. Oh, it looks like my connection is better now. Thank you so much, those of you who've been sticking with me. So sorry about that. Let me see. Oh, and a variation of this scarecrow idea is John Barleycorn, who is a piece of English folklore. And I made this kind of spooky video about John Barleycorn that I've linked down below if you're interested in. And I've also linked about 10 to 15 other autumn equinox / Mabon videos I've made in the past, including like craft, cooking, spells, all of that kind of stuff. So I got a whole playlist for you down there in the description box if you're interested in learning more. So let me check your comments here. Okay. Let's see. Spooky Season says, I think they'd call the cops if someone made a Priapus scarecrow. Very true. Let's see. Oh, an interesting comment here from Lunasa that says, is it an insult to use Wiccan Sabbat names and not be Wiccan? So I personally don't think so. I think in general, Wiccans tend to be pretty open-minded people. So I've been using Wiccan terminology for some of the holidays that I celebrate, even though I don't specifically think of myself as Wiccan. And I don't think that that's necessarily an insult to Wicca. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. Let's see. Oh, and I see some of you in the comments are mentioning John Barleycorn. Yes, it's super fascinating. I highly recommend you check out my John Barleycorn video. Let's see. Okay. So the next obscure tradition I wanted to talk to you guys about is wassailing. Now, I've talked a bit about wassailing before, but more often around Yule time. Now, this is a weird tradition because modern pagans usually celebrate this tradition closer to Yule, but historically, it would have been celebrated closer to the autumn equinox. And, I kind of wanted to talk about it now because if you are thinking about wassailing, now is the time to do it. Wassailing has to do with the apple orchards primarily, though the term wassail means many different things. And we all know one of the best autumn activities is probably to do anything with apples, whether you're apple picking, whether you're baking apple pie, drinking hard cider, whatever that may be, this is the time of apples. So I've been kind of shifting my wassailing tradition to be more connected to autumn equinox, which is when it would have been done historically as opposed to Yule. Now I do have a wassailing video that is going to go more into this tradition, more into detail on this tradition down in the description box, but I thought I'd go over a little bit with you guys today. So let me take a sip of my drink and we'll jump into it. So now wassail is an interesting word. It's both a drinking cheer, like you can say wassail, but it's also a specific type of alcoholic beverage, usually either a spiced cider or spiced wine or some type of spiced mixture of cider and wine. And it's an activity, it's a verb. You can go wassailing. You might be familiar with the Christmas carol, like, here we come, a wassailing beneath the leaves of green. Yeah. So it's all three of those things. So the word most likely comes from Old Norse, actually, and the phrase "veshael," which means be healthy. And traditionally, this would be used in a cheering type scenario. So someone would say "veshael," which eventually became wassail, and then the common response means drink hail. So you would say drink hail afterwards, which means drink and be healthy. So if someone says to you, wassail, you would say drink hail. And this word wassail first appeared in English literature in the pagan poem of Beowulf. Now, if you have not read Beowulf yet, I highly recommend it because it's such a great piece of literature where we can actually learn a fair bit about what pagan culture was like. What were some of these wider ideas associated with family, with morality, with adventure in Beowulf? Because it's one of the few pieces of literature we have from that time, at least in the Northern European pagan traditions. So that's the first thing, this term as a toast. And as pagans, most of us like to toast each other, like to drink, perhaps. Of course, not all. But so that's kind of the first piece. But then wassail is also a holiday beverage that can be drunk both at the autumn equinox or at Yule, based on your preference. I personally am a big fan of warm, hard cider. It's still a little bit warm here in Savannah, so I haven't started making that drink. But as soon as it cools down a bit, I'm definitely going to make some wassail, and I'll probably be drinking some of it in my drinking horn during Pagan Happy Hour. So there are many different recipes for wassail. It can include a number of different things. One of the oldest versions of wassail is called Ren wine. This is coming from the medieval period in England. But red wine is actually something that resembles an even older ancient Roman spiced beverage called Hippocras. So it's possible that medieval Ren wine is derived from ancient Roman Hippocras, which is, again, kind of this spiced alcoholic drink. And I did link a recipe and a YouTube video I found on how to create the ancient Roman Hippocras. So if you are interested in a really obscure pagan tradition to do, then perhaps making your own version of wassail or Ren wine or Hippocras, that would be something fun to do. And again, we are connecting to both the wine harvest that traditionally occurs at this time, plus the apple harvest, depending on what pagan culture you're looking at. Because in the Greco-Roman world, it was all about those grapes. But in Northern European culture, it was all about the apples. So you were either making wine or hard cider at this time of year. So either of those two beverages are really great things to be imbibing for the autumn equinox. So let me check your comments and then we'll talk a bit more about wassailing. Let me see here. Oh, I see some of you guys are also fans of hard cider. That's great. Me too. Yeah, let's see. Oh, let's see. Oh, Rachel has an interesting question, saying, when I was in school, we were taught that Beowulf was the very first written novel. Is that still the common knowledge? And then I see someone, Peach, down below in the comments is correcting, saying Gilgamesh is the first. So yeah, I think in general, Gilgamesh is now considered to be the first novel. So Gilgamesh is also fascinating to read if you are a pagan, because you can get a sense of how odd ancient pagan culture was in the ancient Near East, and how fascinating too. That's something that I really wish I knew more about. I really want to learn more about ancient Near Eastern pagan culture and traditions. So Sumeria, Sumer, learning a bit more about cuneiform, things like that. There's a wonderful, wonderful museum in Chicago, which is called the Oriental Institute. It's on the campus of the University of Chicago, and it's a free museum. If you ever get the chance to go, they have a wonderful collection of ancient Near Eastern art as well as ancient Egyptian artifacts. So yes, definitely check that out if you are interested. And when I see in the comments, Queen Boudica is mentioning that the Old Testament ripped off the Epic of Gilgamesh. Yes, there is quite a bit of Gilgamesh in the Old Testament, which makes it interesting. Let's see. Oh, and I have another super chat here from Krishna. Thank you so much. I very much appreciate. So back to wassailing. So another thing about this popular drink that I highly recommend making, there are many different recipes online. This was a drink that was traditionally drunk in a bowl as opposed to a cup. Now, this is weird, but in medieval Europe, what they would do is they would either dip their bread or their toast into their wassail, or they would sprinkle little crusty pieces of toast into their wassail beverage. So if you're curious where the word toasting comes from, it comes from wassailing. So you would have toast in your wassail. So the idea of toasting each other comes from wassailing. So I thought that was kind of neat. And the last thing that makes this word really unique is it is also an activity. You go wassailing. Now, to go wassailing could mean different things. In later times, it would mean like going door to door and singing carols and things like that. But traditionally, you would go wassailing in the apple orchards, because it was important to both recognize the spirits of the orchard and to ensure a good, healthy harvest of apples so that you can make that hard cider. So what villagers would do, and this practice, keep in mind, mostly took place in Britain, specifically in the western region of Britain, which traditionally and today, the production of cider is still very important to the community. What you would do is you'd go into the orchards and you would sing and you would toast the spirits of the orchard. There was even a spirit, a folklore spirit called the apple tree man, kind of similar to the green man, if you are familiar. And sometimes people would dip toast in cider and hang the pieces on the branches of the tree. And you'll still actually see that in parts of rural England today. Or they might tie ribbons around certain branches. And they would also sing and kind of maybe even bang pots and pans to kind of scare away the evil spirits, just so it could like ensure the health of the apple orchard. So, it's just kind of a neat tradition. And I love the idea of wassailing in the orchard. So if you live somewhere near an apple orchard, or if you have an apple tree in your backyard, one of the best ways, in my opinion, to celebrate the autumn equinox is to wassail your tree spirit, to go out there with a cup of wassail, whether that be spiced cider or wine, to cheers the spirits of the tree, to honor all the spirits of this time of year, and to celebrate the season. So singing, just having a picnic at the base of an orchard or tree or something like that would be a fun and kind of historically accurate way to celebrate the autumn equinox. And I definitely grew up going to apple orchards. It was one of my favorite autumn activities. I grew up in upstate New York, where the autumn is just gorgeous. And every year for my birthday, which falls in October, I would always go to the orchards. So I love the idea of now as an adult, I can go to the orchards and leave a little offering or do a little wassailing to honor the spirits there. So that is wassailing in a nutshell. And I do have my video linked down below that goes into more detail with lots of photos of various wassailing traditions. But I hope, you might have found that interesting. I thought it'd be more fun this year to go over some more obscure autumn equinox pagan traditions, because I've been making lots of content over the years about the autumn equinox, and I wanted to bring something that maybe might have been something you haven't heard of before. So next we'll go into just kind of a few other ways you can celebrate the autumn equinox. But let me have a sip first and we'll jump into that. Okay, let me check your comments. Okay. Let's see. There's a good comment from Funny Pagan Guy that says, English witches are a real fun bunch. So many graveyards. Yes, there are a lot of witches in England. It'd be kind of fun living there as a pagan. They still do celebrate a lot of the old traditions versus here in America. Obviously, we don't really have as much pagan culture intermixed into daily life. Let's see. Okay. Let's see, comment here from Spooky Season that says, Mabon was the day I first started my witchcraft journey a couple years ago. Well, wonderful, and congratulations for being part of the community. That's wonderful. Let's see. Okay, so a couple other traditions to go over. Now, you don't have to do anything super elaborate like creating a scarecrow or wassailing in the orchards, though I highly recommend it. You can celebrate the autumn equinox in your own way, whatever that may be. So I did go over several different easier traditions to do at this time of year. Of course, you can decorate your home for the season. I am a big fan of doing this sustainably. So going for a walk and gathering branches, pine cones, whatever you see about you, or maybe getting a few pumpkins or gourds or things like that, things that will naturally decompose. And I think last time in Pagan Happy Hour, someone had the excellent idea if you can actually use those pumpkins later as offerings. So you can use them to decorate your home, and then you can cut them up and put them in the woods and leave it as an offering. Love that idea. So I'm a big fan of doing that, which is why I don't really have many decor items here, because I don't really, personally, I don't like buy a bunch of stuff for seasons. I like to decorate with natural stuff, and I haven't quite, bought pumpkins and gourds yet, but I will for sure. So that's an easy thing to do. Of course, celebrating the season by eating what's in season is wonderful. And I always think of apple everything for this time of year. And then as we get a little bit later into the pumpkin season for October, I usually eat a lot of pumpkin-inspired things. But another thing to think about is many modern day witches actually consider Mabon to be the witches' Thanksgiving, and a lot of them will celebrate with a feast. And having a feast of seasonal foods is something really fun and simple you can do to celebrate the season. So go for it. If you want to make this your witches' Thanksgiving, totally do it. I think that's wonderful. I recommend, if you don't necessarily want to wassail the orchards, I recommend maybe trying to do like a hard cider recipe or some type of drink that you can create. And of course, you can create a non-alcoholic one as well. I did have a book recommendation in that regard, which is this book I picked up last year. And I have this linked below if you're interested. This is Sacred and Herbal Healing Beers. And this book, it sounds kind of obscure. It is fascinating. It goes over drink recipes from so many ancient cultures and does them in a way that doesn't seem intimidating. Like all you need is like a bucket and some herbs and you can make an ancient Sumerian beverage or whatever. It goes over so many different ancient cultures and their various drinks. So this was a really fun read, even if you don't make anything. Just reading through the recipes and their histories is fascinating, and it has kind of cool images as well. So here's some nice mandrake root, some elderflower. So really good book if you happen to be into historic or pagan beverages. And I wanted to share that with you. So let's see, we have about 10 minutes left. If you have any questions for me, I would love to answer any of your questions for today. So now is the time to share your questions, your thoughts, and I'm going to bring them into the conversation. And still got a couple sips of my beer left as well. Okay, let's see. Oh, in the comments, Jenna is saying, we might crack open a bottle of mead we made back in March. That sounds wonderful. One of the things I just discovered, if you're not familiar, I recently moved to the lovely city of Savannah, Georgia. There's a company here called the Savannah Bee Company, and they sell mostly honey, but they also sell this amazing collection of meads too. So I've been trying that out. I did a mead tasting there a while ago. And of course, Alehorns does mead as well. So if you are wanting to try mead, you can check some out at the link in the description. It's kind of this weird mix between wine and hard liquor. I think it takes getting used to. I'm still working on trying to drink mead. It's not my initially favorite beverage, but I'm going to keep trying because I know you Norse pagans love your mead. Let's see. Oh, Thistle Whisper is asking what's my favorite autumn recipe. I am such a sucker for apple crisp. I'm too lazy to make apple pie, but like apple crisp with a nice good topping, lots of brown sugar. I love that. Let's see. Oh, and Peach is mentioning she's going to be celebrating by having a fire in her fire pit. Yes, bonfires, celebrating around the fire is a huge part of pretty much all pagan festivals. So that's a great way to celebrate. Let's see. Oh, interesting comment or question. Let's see. Question from Genghis Galahad is asking, are cornucopias a pagan-based traditional symbol? Yes, I do believe there are images of, I think it's Demeter. It might be a different goddess, but who is shown with a cornucopia. So I think this goes back to ancient Rome. Might need to double check that. But yeah, the cornucopia is a pretty ancient symbol. So yes, I do think that does come from these much older pagan harvest festivals. Great question, though. Oh, and I see, Oh, a question here about the making of corn dollies. Is it common during the autumn harvest? Yes, so making corn dollies is something you could definitely do during the autumn harvest. Traditionally, I think that pagan practice is more associated with the holiday Lunasa, which occurs in the start of August. So normally people do it for that holiday, but you could definitely do it for this holiday as well. Yeah, let's see. Let's see, checking all your comments. And then another comment about the cornucopia. Rachel is asking, do cornucopias have anything to do with horns? Yes, a cornucopia is also called a horn of plenty. So you can imagine that the original cornucopias might have been a actual, like a horn, like an animal horn, for example, that you might fill with grains or vegetables, things like that. Or it would have been like a straw constructed horn, to look like a horn. So yes, cornucopias are also called the horn of plenty. Let's see. Oh, great detail here on the cornucopia. Thank you very much, Vokatis. That says, in Greek legend, the cornucopia actually refers to the horn of Amalthea, the name given to the goat who fed the infant Zeus on Crete. Okay, so it's the goat's horn. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much for sharing that. And then Krishna in the comments is mentioning a goddess from Gaul. Rosmerta is often shown holding a cornucopia. And another deity to be thinking about from Gaul would be Suselius, who is a deity associated with the wine harvest, kind of similar to Bacchus. So let's see. And thank you so much, Vokatis, for the super chat. So thank you again for sharing that detail there, because I love when you guys share details on things that I don't yet know. So thank you so much for that. Let's see. Lauren Itzum says in the comments, do we know what the ancient Gallic people or Gaelics. Oh, sorry. So the Gaelics called the autumn equinox. No, I don't believe we do, but I could be wrong on that. So maybe someone does know in the comments on that one. Let's see. Oh my goodness, so many great comments. Well, let me see here. I'm just gonna have another sip of my drink and then we'll probably sign off. So if you have anything else to share or add, now is the time to do that. Oh, we have a super chat here from Rachel. Cheers. Thank you so much. That says, have a wonderful Mabon/autumn equinox, everyone. Yes, thank you so much. And that's probably a good note to end on. Thank you guys. This has been so wonderful. And again, I have a lot of other videos and resources linked down below in the description for you to learn more about Mabon and the autumn equinox. And again, a big thank you to Alehorns for sponsoring today's episode of Pagan Happy Hour and for creating this lovely drinking horn for me. It's so fun to actually have it say Pagan Happy Hour. So thank you to them. And again, their link is down in the description if you would like your own customized drinking horn, if you'd like to pick up any mead or anything like that. So I hope you all have a absolutely wonderful autumn equinox, and I will see you next Friday. Talk to you later. Bye.